Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Londonderry Town Council meeting for today, October 28th, 2019. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing, as is our tradition here at the Town Council meeting. We want to honor all those men and women here, abroad, who protect this nation, and all those first responders. Thank you. Okay, folks, the Town Council meeting opens up with public comment. We have a couple of agenda items this evening, which are, one of them is regards to the Old Home Day, and one of them is with regards to the most recent baseline water study, in which DES will be here as well this evening. I would ask if you have comment regarding those, please hold those comments until those presentations, and we'll allow comment then. All right, so under public comment, we have a couple of quick things. Justin, we were gonna handle the tax rate piece under public comment, right?
I believe so.
And when you come on up, and let's take that off the table first, and then I'll go to the public. So ladies and gentlemen, Justin Campo is going to join us. He's the finance director for the town. Most recently, the tax rate was released by the town. I believe it's $19.36.
39 cents.
39 cents. And we're down from?
$21.80.
So-
$2.41.
So with the tax rate being down, folks, doesn't necessarily mean that the taxes are going to go down. As was reported by another government entity here in town, they mentioned that the taxes would be going down on homes $400 to $500 a year. That was an inaccurate statement. I'm going to ask Justin to step us through that. We have what was called a revaluation year. So all of you know that your houses were assessed, and in today's market, they all increased. In some cases, some increased 10%, 15%, and 20%. What happened here in town is that the commercial property did not go up as fast as the residential property. So that happens from time to time when we go back and forth doing these valuations. So then some of the burden gets shifted back to the residential. Sometimes the commercial goes up higher, and the burden is shifted to the commercial side. But I'll let Justin explain that and explain where we stand.
So on the off chance your house remained the exact same value, your taxes would go down. However, as you stated, many houses, I believe the average was between 15 and 18%. And depending on your house value, you'll see an increase of taxes based on that amount. Based on a $300,000 home at 17%, you're looking at about $266 a year. 15%, you're looking at about $150 a year.
So, but in some cases, it will remain flat.
Yes, that's, if you look at probably about 10%, if your house value increased about 10%, I don't have that number exactly, your taxes will most likely remain the same as they were expected to be in the last budgeting cycle.
So folks, tax bills are going to go out November 1st. They're going to come out with a new valuation number on them. So if your home was assessed at $400,000, it's probably going to be assessed at something higher than that. So,
So do you mind if I speak up real quick?
Please-
I was
please
looking
do.
at the wrong sheet. That was based on the 2180 tax rate of 2008, or 2018, where those values, based on the valuation we currently have, the 17% tax house, a 17% increase would only be about $77.
okay. I
I was
thought we would be
looking at
closer to
the-
flat.
Yeah, I was looking at 2180 compared to the 1939.
Okay, so that means the increase will be, we think it will be fairly low.
It should
But
be.
there will be,
There will
most
be an
most people
increase,
will
depending
find an
on-
increase.
Yeah.
And folks, that's because of things like you see it going on around town, like the fire station being built and things that were approved by the voters. If I did ask the tax collector to look at a $400,000 home in 2010 and a $400,000 home today, that home in 2010 was about $9,500. With the increased revenue that has come into the town with Pettingill Road and the commercial development, that number is close to the same as it was. So over a 9-year period, we're still doing okay. So for the folks who see the building that's going on commercially in town, that revenue has done a nice job of trying to offset some of the taxes And it's designed that way so that the residential taxpayers get some relief or they don't take the burden, right?
That would be correct.
Okay. So, folks, we're in public comment. Justin's up here on taxes only. Does anyone have any comments or any questions?
How does the water contamination affect our taxes?
We'll talk all about water when we get to water.
Okay, thanks.
Okay? Yes, sir. Can you come up front, please?
Oh, good Lord, no.
Yeah, we have to do this thing where you have to give your name and your address, and our clerk has to record it. There's all kinds of minutes and rules, and we've got to follow those.
Who's the clerk? I'm sorry. I'll apologize in advance. So my name is Paul Ambler.
Yes, sir.
I live at Tokenell Drive.
Hi.
And so I'm gonna have a few comments, but specifically related to taxes, because you made mention of it, you know, paying for this fantabulous fire station. I seem to recall a number of ballot questions appearing in the voting elections that said, you know, the net impact for the taxpayers on this vote is $0.
Yes?
$0, $0. And I found that really hard to believe at that time, but what you just said kind of tipped it off to me. It seems as though there's a plan to reassess the valuation to increase the tax revenue for the town to pay for some of these programs. And we can call it $0, but the real net effect is it's going to be an increase in taxes.
So
So-
valuations are done by state law. They regulate when we do them. We don't decide when we do them, just
Okay.
so you know.
No, I totally understand that, but
Okay.
I would assume there's a plan in place to actually, like, there's going to be a valuation based on a state plan, and we're going to change the valuations of the home to generate more revenue. So I guess my question is, listen, I understand how things work. You want to build stuff, it costs money. But can we at least be a little bit more transparent with the taxpayers in the town and say, hey, this isn't really net zero tax dollars. It actually is going to cost you this much money, and we're going to figure out how to raise that. It's either going to be an increase in the tax rate or an increase in the valuation of your home at the same tax rate. But I think there needs to be more transparency.
So the warrant articles in which you were referring to that have a zero tax impact, those are funded by what's called the undesignated fund balance.
Sure.
So we have a balance of money that we hold, and we hold a certain percentage of that. When we reach a point that we're exceeding the percentage that we should be holding, we go out, people come and say, we would like to do X, whatever that might be. Maybe it's the rail trail. And they come and they ask, you know, will you entertain taking that to the voters? That goes to the voters. That money comes out of that fund and does not affect that rate for that fund. Now, 2 years ago, we took $1 million out of that fund and gave it back to the taxpayers.
Okay.
So when someone comes with something like the fire department, which was 6.2?
Four.
$6.4 million, then on the warrant, it says it's going to be X number of dollars per thousand. And that, so the difference between what you see on the ballot is when there's a dollar number, that's a tax increase.
Okay.
When it's zero, that's money that we're taking basically out of our savings account to pay for it.
So I guess my inevitable question, as opposed to just rambling, is there is not a concerted effort to try to essentially, I don't want to say misrepresent, because I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything like
understand.
that, but there's not a concerted effort to say, hey, this is $0 tax increase because you're actually not increasing the taxes, you're just changing the valuations. That's my question. You're not doing that. When you when you pose these warrant articles with a certain dollar figure impact, you're not doing
So-
that.
Can I,
Yeah, go ahead.
if you don't mind, sorry
You're
to
helping me
interrupt.
learn, man.
Nope, it's perfectly fine. I think what you're trying to say is last year, we didn't include this valuation.
Right.
We did to an extent. If you look at what we put the valuation at last year, I believe it was originally in 2018, it was about 3.6, and we upped it to 4.02. So we tried to, but we don't want to go and say, we're going to get 4.5 billion valuation, and turns out, well, you know, it's only 4.2, and then we're coming to you now and saying, hey, you got to pay quite a bit more. Does that make sense?
I think I understand that.
Another way,
So, actually, I have it right here if you'd like to look. This is what we budgeted at 4 billion, 20 million for the valuation of what we expected it to grow to.
My house is nowhere near that worth.
This
that.
is for the entire town. It came in at 4,600,000,000.
Okay, all right.
So that's, but with all the,
that's-
everything going on in town, that's what it is. We didn't want to overestimate and have to come back to you now and say,
Okay,
hey, that 2180 is actually going to be higher.
I understand.
Yep.
So that was the thought on that.
Okay,
I'm going to turn to Councilor Dolan here in just a second, but what we try to help people understand is that it takes $112 million a year to run the town. So it's $77 million to the schools, $35 million to the town. So regardless of what the tax rate is or the valuations are, we already had a budget set in place for $112 million. So we got to raise $112 million. So, and a lot of folks just don't understand that it's gotten expensive.
yeah.
Let me explain it a slightly different way, and I think maybe it might be easier to understand. When the chairman mentioned the undesignated fund balance, think of that as a rainy day fund. It's leftover monies from prior years and the current year.
Right.
So that's money in a bank account. So when we look to spend some money through a warrant article and we say there's no tax impact, that's because we're taking that money from that piggy bank or that rainy day fund, and we're not going to the taxpayers to say, give us some more money.
Right.
If there was a scheme, if you will, to try to raise taxes for projects through a reevaluation with a statement that we're not gonna raise any, I don't think that's legal. And I think that the state would shoot us down in a minute when that goes to the Department of Revenue. All the warrant articles have to go to the State Department of Revenue Administration, you hear the term DRA, for them to look at, examine, and approve before they can go on the ballot. So there's lots of checks and balances. So when we say there's zero tax impact, it's because we've already got the money. It's in the rainy day fund, and we're gonna spend that money. When we say, in some cases, it's a $200,000 project, 100,000 will be paid for by undesignated fund balance, and 100,000 will be through raised taxes. So we're gonna go to the taxpayers and say, will you pay 100,000 of this $200,000 project?
Sure.
So we're trying to be transparent, and explain to you, the valuation increase really should be a zero-sum game.
Yep.
If everything was equal, let's say that the budgets from one year to the next were exactly the same, and if the valuation goes up this high, then the tax rate has to drop in a correspondingly way, so the tax impact is zero.
Right.
Now, there's a lot of dynamic things going on in the year, so it never works out to be exactly zero because there are spendings and so forth. But when your valuation goes up, your tax rate goes down. In this case, the tax rate goes down about 10%, and if your valuation goes up 15%, then there's a 5% increase in your tax bill.
The good news is what I can tell you is on Saturday, we're having a budget workshop, and the direction that the council has given to the finance director and the town manager is the cut back on the warrant articles.
Cut back on the what?
Cut back on the warrant articles and get to a shorter ballot. So that is the direction we've given them, because,
That'd be pretty awesome.
you know, we pay too.
Yeah, yeah,
So we hear you.
okay. No, I appreciate the clarifications.
No worries. Thank you.
Don't cut that solar credit, because I just found out about that after having solar for like 4 years, and
Well, we're not cutting that, and we're putting in a solar farm that we're going to get money from.
sweet.
If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call.
Will do, thank you.
So, all right, so if there's nothing else on taxes, we have a presentation this evening that I'm going to move to. Anything else on taxes? We're good. Okay, so I have the Kent Allen Forest Storybook Trail presentation by Girl Scout Troop 12591. Ladies.
First, I'm going to introduce, my name is Gwen St. Germain, live at 12 Royal Lane. I am one of the Girl Scout leaders for Troop 12591, and everybody else can introduce themselves.
Sure. I'm Sarah Fagan. I'm a second leader of Troop 12591 at 9 Hemlock Street. Yeah, you don't.
So girls, why don't you come on up here, sit up at the microphones, and come on right up. I promise, it's going to be easy.
So are
There's a couple there
There's
too.
a couple chairs over there too, microphones.
Two
You can sit
chairs over
there
here
too.
if you want.
So girls, introduce yourself and then the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Megan St. Germain. I live at 12 Royal Lane.
Hi, Megan.
Hi.
Hello, I'm Katya Shalinsky, and I live at 36 Clark Road.
Hi.
Alyssa Fagan, 9 Hemlock Street.
Welcome.
I'm Shaylee Ambler. I live 14 Tocqueville Drive.
Welcome. Ladies, the floor is yours.
All right, so today we are basically showing everybody, showing the town, the timeline for the Storybook Trail, which is now called the Storybook Tale. We, as cadet troop, have earned the Silver Award. Everybody knows about the Boy Scout Eagle Award, but this is the highest award that a cadet can earn. In the photo here, you can see the little white flag. Take note of that. You'll see some changes later. So before the Girl Scouts decided on the Kent Allentown Forest as their Silver Award project, they had to do an outdoor journey, and this started back in June of 2018. They had permission from the Conservation Committee to camp in the Musquash. And by doing that, they needed to follow the leave no trace principles. And some of them that you can see on the right are plan ahead and prepare, travel and camp on durable surfaces, dispose of waste properly, leave what you find, minimize campfire impacts, respect wildlife, and be considerate of other visitors. Their Take Action project was in September of 2018, where they decided to basically run a field day and a run. And they talked to all of everybody who came about how to recycle and how to leave no trace when you go in and like when you're camping and so on, and take out what you have there. By doing so, they developed a story which had all the characters that you can see on the right, and that we'll tell you about a little bit more in some more of the slides. So the initial project development was basically between June and December of 2018. They chose the Kent Allentown Forest. It had very nice trails. They basically scoped out what they might find in the forest, including different animals, chipmunks, squirrels, what you'd basically find in the forests of New England.
So, a part of the Silver Award is that each girl needs to complete at least 50 hours of work towards the project to earn the award. So we decided to divide and conquer the tasks of writing the story. So we split up into writers, and that group was me. And the artists were Haley Grenier, Alyssa Fagan, and Shaylee Ambler. And the girls who constructed the storybook trail itself and all the signs were Megan St. Germain and Sophia Miller. So before going through with this project, we needed approval from a lot of people. So we had to gain approval from a lot of different committees and figures in the town. For example, we gained approval from the Allens to build the storybook trail in their forest, and that is a picture from that event on the left. Also, throughout the progress of this project, we've had many different news articles and photos taken of us in local newspapers, and some pictures of those are on the right. So the first thing we needed to do was to write the story, because we needed to have it written down to be able to make the illustrations and then build the storybook trail. So that's a picture of me writing the story. And we needed to gain approval from the Leave No Trace Foundation to use their name in our story and their principles.
All right, so these are all our characters. There's Charlotte the Chipmunk, Dottie the Deer, George the Goat, Olivia the Owl, Walter the Woodpecker, and Trevor the Turtle. All their pictures are on the left. And the three pictures on the right, the first one, the smaller one, was when we first designed it. The second one was when this other smaller one is when we used outdoor materials to use because they said we had to use some things in ours. And then the final one, the biggest one, is one that is our final one, which is right now kind of similar to the one we have on the trail.
So, during the construction, me and Sophia wanted to visualize what the kiosks would look like before we actually made them. So we made those on an app called AutoCAD, and
Nicely done.
we needed to do a lot of fundraising to get enough money to make for the materials. So we did movie nights and had a stand at Old Home Day, and we've sold cookies and had yard sales. The materials that we used were Omega Bond signs, marine grade plywood, so it will last longer, and we varnished it, and it has UV blocking to protect from the sun. And these are some photos of the installation.
Okay, so what you see here are the actual final kiosks that have been placed in the Kent Island Forest. The first one covers the theme of Leave What You Find. We have our characters that were developed by our artists. Dottie and George start off the story that was written by Katya. We move on to the second kiosk, where the principle that is taught in this one is to respect wildlife. We have our characters Dottie and George disrupting Trevor the turtle. As you move through the trail, you come to the third kiosk, teaching the principle of leave what you find. And then the third one of dispose of waste properly, and the fourth one of travel and camp on durable surfaces. Okay. Further along, you come to kiosk number 5, which covers plan ahead and prepare, and onto kiosk 6, which covers minimize campfire impact. We then move on to number 7, which is be considerate of other visitors, and number 8, which discusses all of the 7 principles of leave no trace and ends their story.
That's 2 pictures of our reveal day. The first one is a picture of all of us gathered around the first kiosk. And then the second one is the sign that I actually made. And we're planning to put that up as soon as we can.
We're kind of waiting for the construction phase to kind of slow down so we can get into the first kiosk.
Yeah.
The grass has grown pretty well over there, so I think you'll.
Looked nice, yeah.
We all took turns going for the trail, and we all showed everybody what we did. We all took turns reading. It was very fun. And then there's our that's our final kiosk. We're all surrounded by it, and we actually got invited to the Young Women of Celebration ceremony. I'm sorry, I can't read. It's really hard to read it from here. And they're gonna present us for our silver award.
And that's on November 9th.
Yep, so a month from now. That's another picture of us around our first.
So what I wanted to just point out is that if you remember that flag in the first photo, this is now what is at that location, the first kiosk.
Mm-hmm.
So to complete this project, we needed a number of sponsors, and we're actually looking for 4 more sponsors. So if anyone is interested in sponsoring our project, please reach out to us. But some of our sponsors were Londonderry Trailways, the Lions Club, Haas Dental, Benson's Lumber, Uber Guy Neil, and of course our Girl Scout troop. And there are a number of people we'd like to thank so much for making this project possible. We'd like to thank this council, of course, and the town manager, the town planner, the town heritage committee, the Allens for giving us approval and suggestions. And I'd like to thank especially our wonderful leaders, Mrs. St. Germain, Mrs. Fagan, and Mrs. Fowle, who couldn't make it today. Like, this project wouldn't be possible without all of them. And thank you to all of you for listening to us.
Oh, ladies, extremely impressive. Anyone who's ever dug a hole in New Hampshire has got to be impressed by digging 8 holes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's extremely good, ladies. Fantastic.
Nice job.
Really nice job. So, folks, we're still in public comment. Does anybody want to follow that? Okay, we're going to get moving then. Ladies, thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
All right, so we're going to move to old business. Old business, discussion of Old Home Day reorganization for the council and Lisa. And I believe, Justin, you're going to come up here and talk to us a little bit about the finances of Old Home Day as well, right?
Okay.
Okay, the floor is yours, Lisa.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, a couple of months ago, the longtime chair and member of Old Home Day Committee approached the town manager to indicate that she had done, and several other committee members had done Old Home Day for 20-plus years, and they're ready to step down and transition it to the next phase, whatever phase that may be. There is an existing resolution right now, back from 2011, establishing the committee as a volunteer-led committee under the auspices of the town. And at that point, it directed that the then Administrative Services Director would be an ex officio member of the committee. We no longer have that position, and it remained a volunteer-led committee under the auspices of the town, and they work with our finance director, on the finances and that sort of thing. But it was really the volunteers that were, planning all the events and making sure that it came off to be the great event that it is. So this evening, we would ask that the council consider, and I don't have one drafted because I wanted you all to be able to talk about it first and tell me what you'd like to put in it, obviously, a new resolution which would specify the parameters of how the Old Home Day Committee will function going forward. We've talked about it internally among the staff. We would recommend that it be sort of a multi-year transition where we as staff recruit and train, if you will, some new volunteers, some fresh blood to take over the Old Home Day Committee, always with, some town oversight, obviously through the finance department, as has been the case for several years. So given that, I open it up to you all to discuss.
Well, let's go through the finances of it first so that people have an understanding of how Old Home Day operates and what it actually costs. So you have some numbers for us?
I do. The current balance is about 23,000, and it's roughly where it was at the start of last year. Kathy has done a good job of keeping it kind of level, where whatever she brings in is what she spends.
Now, from what I understand, the parade costs about $13,000,
I believe that would be accurate, yes.
and they raise about $9,800 from selling booths.
Yep.
I believe it was quoted recently in an article that we raised $98,000. It's really only $9,800. From sponsorships, we pick up how much more?
From sponsorships, it would probably be between 3,000 to 5,000, depending on the year.
Okay, and then the council funds 12,000?
10,150, I believe.
And then we-
10,150.
And then we pay for the fireworks through the fire department.
Correct.
So the last 3 years, we didn't have any fireworks, so this year's fireworks were $24,000?
21.
$21,000?
Yep.
So to do the 300th anniversary this year cost approximately how much?
For the 300th anniversary or the fireworks? Those are two separate things.
Old Home Day and the 300th anniversary, they kind of happen together, about $55,000?
So we got 25,000 from from the voters for 300th. We have about 10,000 left, so about 35 to 40,000.
Okay, plus what the fireworks will cost us.
Yes.
So about $50,000 to $55,000. Okay. All right, so going forward, we're looking at probably something, in, those kind of numbers that we're looking at going forward. So what the, so with the resignation, we probably got down to about half a dozen volunteers. And we had a meeting last week in which Mary Wing Soares resigned, Kathy Wagner resigned. Kathy Wagner said she'll stay on and work with the staff going into next year with all the planning that had been done over the last 25 years. It was actually sort of funny at the meeting. We were going around trying to figure out how to turn the television on. And somebody, I think it was Mary Soares, picked up a button and hit it. And then I'm standing in the hallway and Sergeant Duguay from the police department's looking at me, asking me why we hit the panic button. So, you know, the police were there, they you know, they participate greatly, but someone hit the panic button by mistake. So I'm not, you know, not even sure how that happened. It was actually, there was a lot of praise in the meeting and a lot of, you know, good things said about people, and it was actually a very positive meeting. So what we're looking for from the council is that we need to give the town manager direction on how to go forward. The suggestion I think she's saying is that we put this under the auspices of the town manager, let the town manager and the assistant manager work through a process of having staff work with us to go out and rebuild the volunteer force of Old Home Day. That sound reasonable?
How are we gonna communicate that out in the public?
Well, first we have to put a resolution together to decide how we're gonna do that. We have to decide what that is. But if you guys don't have any comments, I promised I would take public comment during this as well, if you would like to wait for that.
Sure.
That'd be great.
So if there's anyone who would like to speak to the Old Home Day subject, I mean, come on up. Either one of you, whichever, ladies first. Come on up, Betsy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Betsy McKinney. I came in about PFOAs this evening, but the Old Home Day strikes a chord. I was the treasurer for the Chamber of Commerce when we took it over, and I think probably it's the time to do something different, but I don't know whether putting a town employee on as chairman is a good idea. I think this should be a volunteer thing. Before the chamber took it over, the town had it for 1 year, and it was kind of a disaster. But that was years ago, when many moons. But I don't know whether you want a town employee spending their time on it. If you appoint somebody that goes to the meetings and keeps an eye on things, I think it's better to keep it an all-volunteer thing. It seems to be we're having less and less public involvement in the town, and I'd like to see that promoted. The other thing is, when
I
the
agree with you,
chamber,
we would love for it to be all volunteers.
the chamber had it, we had a $1,500 budget, and the parade got $500, the bandstand got $500, and the chairman that were responsible for that, if they overexpended, they came out of their pocket. We also had a part-time secretary, a 501c, things that the resources that this committee, when they took over, didn't have. We had their own checking account and so forth. And I think that was the problem. They haven't kept minutes. That's not a big deal in my opinion, because the chamber's minutes read Old Home Day was discussed. And the other thing was the televising, and that must be as boring as watching paint dry. Then the finances would be a simple thing. You could have a one-rate system and take care of that, even though it runs through the town. Certainly there's records and you could pick it up. And it's such a little thing. What do they write? 200 checks a year, probably? I don't think so, even that many. You could do it with a pencil and a piece of paper. So I'd like to see the townspeople involved, and the town, the fireworks were always a problem because it's so expensive. But I don't think that a town employee should be chairman. I don't think taxpayers should have to pay for it. And I just think you need a dedicated group that really works hard. And it is a lot of work. If you think of planning a People get all bent out of shape planning weddings for 200 people. And these people have been putting on 5 nights and 5 days of parties and probably for 8 to 10,000 people. They've worked hard and they deserve the recognition they don't always get. So that's my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you for that.
Do you mind if I chime in on the expenses here?
Why don't we let
Oh,
Bob.
all right.
My name is Bob Ramsey, and I had the privilege of being one of the last chamber presidents. And to get a little bit of a history, it wasn't all volunteer. We raised most of the funds for the fireworks by having a Caris rides down in Shaw's Plaza to raise money for the fireworks. And one of the reasons the chamber walked away from this was because of the fact that in our last year, we used to get, I think the last year we got $1,000 from the council. And we were asked to come in and do an accounting of where the $1,000 went. And at that point, it had become a political football, much like what's happening today. My gut feel is, as Betsy feels, it should be a volunteer. And I think you have a source of volunteers in the leadership group. We've got a bunch of people who are looking to get involved in town matters, and the best way to get involved with town matters is to know what's going on in town. And getting Old Home together probably is one of the better ways to find out how the inner workings of the town work and getting used to doing some things to help the town. So I just feel the volunteer would make it a better situation, probably cost the town a little bit less. And with Kathy staying on, you've got a year to convince her maybe she'd like to stay on longer. So that's my take on it.
Thank you.
I didn't intend to come here tonight. I came for something else, but I couldn't shut up, so.
Yeah, Bob, you've only been the head of the Traffic Safety Committee for 30 years, right?
27.
Well, yeah, so, you know.
I don't want to get any older than I already am.
Yes, anybody for Old Home Day? Yes?
Ann Champa, 28 Wedgewood Drive. Can I ask what the $25,000 was for that you listed?
The voters allocated $25,000
That was
by
the
warrant
300th
article
anniversary.
for the 300th birthday.
300th anniversary of Nutfield. Now, are we lumping that in with Old Home Day?
The question I asked the finance director was, in combination with Old Home Day, since they did happen pretty much at the same time, what was the total amount that we spent this year?
Okay, I heard there was 10,000 left from the 300th anniversary of Nutfield.
That's not an exact number. I want to say it's probably between 7 and 10. I don't know that off the top of my head.
But that's for the 300th
yep.
anniversary of
Yep.
Nutfield celebration.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to.
That is segregated from the Old Home Day funds.
Right. I just want to make
Yep.
that, I asked that question to make it clear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else on Old Home Day? Okay, so it sounds like the direction is that we're going, does the council have any questions? So it sounds like we're going to move this to some sort of secondary hearing, put together a couple of different options, and then come back and discuss them at our next meeting.
Sounds good to me.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. Next item. We're moving to new business. Presentation of the baseline water study, water quality study. Is anyone here from the Novus Engineering? Yes, sir. How are you? Fine, thank you. Is DES here too? So, gentlemen from DES, if you don't mind, could you come up and take these chairs over here, please, and introduce yourselves? So, oops, hang on. Just wait a minute.
Here, if you want, we can share one.
I've got extra, I've got one too.
Tabletop here, we can share it on.
Have my own copy, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry, I marked yours up a
I'm just
little
going to do
bit.
introductions first. So first, let's just introduce the folks who are here at the microphone, starting with Steve.
Steve Cotton, Town of Londonderry, Administrative Support Coordinator.
Sir,
Yeah, I'm Mark Henderson. I'm with the Nobis Group in Concord, New Hampshire.
thank you, sir. Gentlemen,
Jeff Martz, New Hampshire DES. I'm the project manager for the St. Cobain site investigation.
thank you.
Clark Frizzy, Assistant Commissioner, New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just so we can level set here, this is, what we're talking about here is the study from the March 2018 ballot in which we were going to go out and survey the wells in town, air wells in town, as I recall. When a warrant article passes, we don't receive funds and cannot go forward until July 1st. That's the beginning of our fiscal year. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the bidding process happened in August, and we awarded it in September.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and then there was about, then we had to go through a series of 3 mailings before we could get to a sampling size that was acceptable?
First, we worked with New Hampshire DES to coordinate the effort so that there was a distinct effort for what we were doing and what DES was doing so that we didn't waste resources and funds doing the sampling. So once we worked out an agreed upon database of the homes that we were going to sample in surface water, then we can pick that, then we could determine selected the homes that we were going to start with, and then the first mailer went out. So that was in January, approximately January timeframe.
Okay.
So
And then, at what point did you have enough homes to be able to say that you had a large enough sampling? Was it after 3 mailings? How long did that take?
we finished the last mailing probably in late spring. We ended up doing we got 32 approvals for private wells. And of course, the surface water, we picked 13 locations throughout the town. And that's
So
in the
late spring, we're talking about May 2019, June 2019?
May, June.
Okay.
Then from there, gather the data, get the report ready. Nobis was interfacing with the people that were on the database, the 32 clients, to give them their information, go over those studies. And then here we are today. Last week, we got the final report with all the information wrapped up in one single report.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a lengthy process, but we want to make sure we've got everything lined up, and we're working with New Hampshire DES to make sure what we're doing aligns with what they're doing. We got some additional funding from DES to assist us. As you remember, we had $35,000 was the amount. I'll just clarify, this is purely water from private wells and surface water. There was no air sampling in this study.
In this particular study? Okay.
Correct.
And this money came from the undesignated fund balance?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Is there something you'd like to present so that everyone can?
Well, as I was saying, it's in the report of the 32 private wells with a new standard, with the revised standard of 12. 13 of the 32 private wells did come above that standard of 12 and above. The highest that we had was 41. So it ranged from 13 to 41 of those 13 samples in the private wells. You'll see in Table 1, in the attachment, in the tables, that the locations where that elevated levels came. Let me get my glasses on. But before we get to the tables, I just wanted to point out to you that in the charts, we broke up the town into 6 districts, just similar to what we've done in the past. There's another table, diagram, ledger, with the PFOA concentrations, which depict that District 1 and District 4, which are more towards the west western side of the town towards the Litchfield line. That's where the concentration was 21 to 41. You'll see that, that's what that map is depicting there. And then all the tables showing the actual results. And those results that are highlighted in little gray are the highlighted areas that are are above the recommended levels set by the state.
I may just add in here for you that we are talking about PFOA here, but there's a lot of things that we analyze for, not just PFOA. For the water supplies, we analyze for volatile organic compounds. We analyze for 8 recre metals, nitrate and nitrite, and then, of course, the PFAS compounds. So there's more to it. That's why there's quite a few tables in there. And Steve went straight to the PFOA information, which is appropriate, but I just wanted to let you know that we did do sampling for a number of other things as well.
Yes, I should have stated the sampling was the same as in the previous, 2000, and then we added PFOA into this study, which was not available back in 2000.
So, gentlemen, have you read this report?
We have. I just got handed a copy this evening. I did
Okay.
page through and looked at the tables and a few other things.
Okay.
Paid attention to the Girl Scouts also.
Good job. So, gentlemen, do you have any questions?
I'd rather go to the public first.
Stan?
Mr. Chairman, historically, the town started this process back in 2001.
Yes.
When it was believed that, there was at least some concern that as the town started to develop more, that we may encounter some environmental stresses on our water supply due to, especially with commercial, industrial development and so forth. So a sampling of wells was done in I think it was around the fall and winter of 2000 to 2001. But I don't believe at that time in history did we do any testing for PFOAs. I think that was.
No, we did not.
This is a relatively new.
Right, this is a new.
Phenomenon.
Yes.
So probably there would be no comparative data.
Correct.
From then till now. The original baseline water study was for comparative reasons, so that 20 years down the road, if we started seeing a lot more gasoline type of MTBE type of additives, and because they tend to move quickly through the watershed, that we would be able to track where it's coming from, so we could say, hey, wait a minute, this is the source of the problem. And that data is still available for things like that. But I know the current nervousness in the greater community, well beyond Londonderry, is the PFOAs that we're seeing coming from the plant over in Merrimack. So with that little snippet of history, I turn back to you, Mr. Chair.
So, I've been attending these meetings, I think I started attending them 3 years ago over in Merrimack, with regards to the water system there and the issues with St. Gobain. I also found something recently on your website with regards to bottled water that's sold in New Hampshire.
Correct.
Are there PFOA ratings in the bottled water that's sold in New Hampshire?
We did do some testing when we knew we were going to be lowering the standards. We went out and got about 20 bottles from various vendors in the state. We did have one source that came up relatively high. There were a couple others that had trace levels, but one was relatively high, and it's sold through multiple retail services here in the state. The actual bottler was in Massachusetts, so we worked with the Massachusetts department that regulates them. They are now out of business. They are not operating. There is no water available on the shelves. the retail fronts in New Hampshire pulled it off the shelves.
Yeah, this is the one that was 50 cents a gallon at Market Basket.
I don't think they sold it through Market Basket.
Well, I can tell you all those waters went away.
It was at Trader Joe's, Whole Foods, Circle K, and a couple other places.
Yeah, I can just tell you they're selling Old Poland Spring now, and all that 50-cent water went away, and the explanation was is the factory's closed. So just sort of interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else, Steve?
No, I just, on page 8 is the conclusion, the recommendations from the report of findings. Again, arsenic is also is relevant in town from the previous apples and types of pesticides that we used back then, plus it's natural.
And it's naturally occurring. And also, there's a proposed reduction on the standard for arsenic of 5 ppb.
Yeah, arsenic standard will go down to 5 ppb. A number of the ones that are highlighted in the table are around 10 ppb, which is the current standard, but a number of them will be significantly above the standard when it's changed.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to ask you gentlemen to, step back and take a seat so I can free up these seats here in the middle. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to entertain comment for this subject and only this subject. The way we do comment here at the town council meeting is you have a limit of 5 minutes. At the discretion of the chair, we can either continue going or not. We ask that you come up, you make your you give your name, your address, you make your comments. And if we can go through everybody once before we start going through people more than one time, we will do our best to try to address your questions with the assistance of DES. So whomever would like to start, please feel free to join us up front.
Mr. Chairman, don't you think these guys should be over here so we can ask them questions as well?
I thought they were going to sit right there, but.
Yeah, because we'll probably have to ask questions of you as well. Please, thank you.
Sir, come on up.
Kevin Whitley, 7 Rolling Ridge. I was glad I opted to get into the testing that they offered. And I'm slightly sick to my stomach to see that I'm number 2 on the list. I really don't know what to say, to be honest. The historical data, there's nothing to go back on, you said, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, records don't exist for this area with
If
regards
you
to
had
PFOA.
tested 5 years ago for these compounds, none of the levels in what I saw on the table would have registered. They'd have all come back non-detect, indicating you were clean.
Because the levels were higher.
The technology to detect back then was not very sensitive. It's come down tremendously in the last couple of years, in part because we have found broad contamination, and we drive the labs to go lower and lower and to test for more and more compounds. If you had taken the same test 5 years ago, you would have gotten a clean bill of health, and it would have been the same level of contamination that's there today.
Right. So, was there any type of, I heard mention of air testing. Was that catching anything prior to that to see movement of this material?
Mr. Chair.
Not, well,
So the air testing when we went in 2001, that's resulted in the Moose Hill air sampling.
yeah, so we have a constant monitoring station.
That's been there quite a while, yeah?
It's been there quite a while. To my knowledge, we do not test PFOA in the air at that site.
That's correct. The plant that's been a lot of the focus, which is St. Gobain, they did do some initial testing a number of years ago. At that point, they did get that they were putting some level of PFAS out, in particular PFOA and actually the salt of it, which is called APFO. There is an air ambient limit, which is an air toxics limit, it has nothing to do with drinking water. They were at that point in violation, and so they committed to reducing the amount that they used in their plant, and they have hit their targets with that. Again, at that point, when we tested water, or if anybody tested water, you would have gotten non-detect. The levels we're talking about are parts per trillion, which are exceedingly small. There has been air testing done in 2016 when we found the problem was coming up, and again in 2018. In 2016, we still did detect that PFOA, which is the primary contaminant you see here, was still showing up. They believed, because of the way the testing was done, that it was due to the ductwork in the factory. So they pulled one whole line, sandblasted it, and put it back in. And we still detected very low levels, but still detectable levels of PFOA coming out. In 2018, we did parallel testing with a commercial lab, and also the EPA has a research and development laboratory. They came with some new methods to do testing, and we're still seeing very, very low levels of PFOA coming out of the plant, but we're not seeing the same levels that we were seeing before, anywhere near the same levels as when they had an exceedance.
So will there be any further testing as far as the wells that were tested on this list? Will there be consecutive testing points or to see if it decreases or increases, or to see whether it's moving through the hydrology?
So there's a, Saint-Gobain entered into a consent decree with NHDES in 2018 that established an area for which they are responsible for the groundwater contamination. In advance of the new standards going into effect of 12 parts per trillion of PFOA, DES asked Saint-Gobain to submit a plan that would identify all the wells inside that consent decree area that exceed that 12 parts per trillion, and then to provide a second component, which was to provide for alternate water, both in the short term in the form of bottled water, and also to plan for a long-term solution, either connection to public water or in-home filtration. So right now, we have received the work plan, and that includes a proposal to test 350 homes as the first round. But I see this as a long-term process of ultimately having to test potentially thousands of wells. So they had to come up with a priority scheme. So the first priority was 350 homes. Most of those were not in the town of Londonderry, because they used a different priority based on proximity to another line that was defined in the consent decree, which was the pre-GMZ, which encompassed most of the wells that exceeded the prior standard of 70 parts per trillion. So to answer your question, we do expect additional testing by Saint-Gobain inside the consent decree area.
Which area is that on that map? I don't have it in front of me.
So those of you who grabbed a copy of this map, there's a few extra up front. The consent decree boundary is the outer blue line.
Can you put it up?
The inner red line on this map is the pre-GMZ boundary, which encompassed most of the wells that exceeded the old standard of 70 parts per trillion.
Yeah, if I could, a couple of key things. So the standard that the state used to have, and we were one of the few states to have any sort of enforceable standard, was 70 parts per trillion for the combination of two PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS. They agreed to provide testing and alternative water for the homes that were above. None of the homes I saw in your table met that old standard. The new standard went into place on September 30th. On October 1st, we were sued by 3M and the Plymouth Water and Sewer District here out of the state to fight those standards. So far, Saint-Gobain has committed to continuing and working, even if something were to happen, a preliminary injunction or something. But we are sort of at an unusual pass that we are being sued by a state entity to stop these standards. And if they were to get a preliminary injunction, we might find Saint-Gobain deciding to wait until the court case tails out. Another important thing, the alternative water that's being used is Monadnock bottled water. Monadnock has been tested multiple times in blind testing. They didn't know we were doing it. I live in Litchfield. We literally pulled bottles out of deliveries to homes in Litchfield, sent it to the lab, non-detect across the board every time. We use the most sensitive and broadest array of testing of anybody in the country. So the bottled water that is being provided, and I know some people in Londonderry were above the standard, and so they're getting bottled water. That is tested. It is not the stuff from Massachusetts that had the problem. We've had a couple people very concerned about that. So we did want to get that across, that it is tested. We are working with Saint-Gobain to get how they're going to go through the rest of the study area and do testing through the rest of the study area. They have sent in a draft of that. We're meeting with them later this week to go over that. it does push to get stuff done. Nobody's ever gonna be happy. I mean, you wanted to get tested last night. You also asked a question as to whether you test through time. In general, no, because these compounds don't break down. As mentioned, MTBE, other additives, things that we normally test for, they do break down. And so there is a point in testing because you can watch it come down and say, okay, am I getting to a safe level? And maybe we can just watch it go away. This stuff doesn't break down, not on these kind of timelines. It's decades. And so there's really not much point in coming back and testing you. If the test came back and there's quality standards, and Novus is a good company, they know how to read the standards. If the lab report comes back that was a good test, it's not flagged, your number's about the same. It may fluctuate a tiny bit, but it's about the same. And we'd rather then take that extra test and go test somebody who's hasn't been tested and find out what's going on in a broader area. Oh, yeah, so the map is up. As Jeff said, the red area inside is the preliminary groundwater management zone that has specific legal meaning as to the responsibility of the party. And then in negotiations with them, with the Attorney General, we did agree to the outer blue boundary, and that was, we agree outside that blue boundary, they're probably not the primary responsible party for PFOA and PFOS. It's not for any of the other compounds, so if we do find that they were spreading other compounds and they spread further, then that blue line doesn't exist. But there are a number of sites as you go around that edge. You'll notice the airport is sort of carved out. They use firefighting foam at airports. There's a number of landfills that cause dents in that line. Landfills tend to have these compounds inside of them. I think there's a car wash down towards the Nashua area. Car washes tend to have these compounds. There's a Superfund site that has a dent. So we tried to fight out the boundary as far as we could to where the Attorney General thought we could win. Where the Attorney General was pretty convinced we couldn't fight it in court, we agreed to the boundary so we could get a consent decree and get their agreement that inside that line, they clearly have responsibility. And the consent decree is online, anybody can read it. It's got the tables of all the houses that are inside of the areas, so you can get a copy of it, it's online. Our website is des.nh.gov. At the very top, there's a blue banner. I think it now says perfluorinated per and polyfluoroalkyl substance investigations. You don't have to read it, just click it, and it takes you, we have a blog. You can go on there, Jim Martin's contact information is on there. If you send him your email address, every time there's an update, you'll get it. We try and use that as a way to keep people in the loop as to what's going on. But all of the background history stuff is in there. The mapper that'll let you go and look at all the samples we've taken throughout the state is there. And so you can actually go sort of get a feel of, is this different than the rest of the state? And all the background briefings and everything else. If this is new to you, there is a ton of information that has been put out, but it doesn't mean it got to everybody. If you go back to some of the earlier presentations, there were briefings in Merrimack and Litchfield and Bedford when this first came up. They've got background on these materials. They've got a presentation from the state epidemiologist, Dr. Ben Chan, that goes through what's known about health effects and what's not known about health effects. So a lot of that information is out there. The new standards are, to be honest, they're very hard to read. They're painful. Because you have to go down into exactly which study was done, how was that carried through the calculations, how does that compare to other states. But if you are more technically minded, they're a wealth of information. And Dr. Jonathan Ali, who's our toxicologist, did do a presentation that's also online that, again, if you want to go that much more technical detail, it's very informative if that's where you want to go.
All right, so I'm looking at the EPA site. The EPA is still at 70 parts per trillion, right?
That's an unenforceable standard. EPA has put out what they call a health advisory. That's unenforceable in any way, shape, or form. That's what we based our emergency rulemaking on when we went to enforceable standards back in 2016. And then now we've gone to MCLs, which are maximum contaminant levels, which are enforceable drinking water standards for public drinking water systems. For these 4 compounds, we're the first state anywhere to go to enforceable MCLs for all 4 compounds.
I have the other states up here. So Saint-Gobain put out an advertisement in the Union Leader, I think it was last week. And I'm trying to remember exactly what the exact numbers they used. I think it was 5 or 6 zeros deep. 0.00001 equals 10 parts per trillion. Is that correct?
A part per trillion is 10 to the minus 12th.
Okay. So I'm just
to give a scale. It's roughly about a drop of water in 10 Olympic swimming pools. And who here has ever swum in an Olympic-sized swimming pool? Very few of you. It's 50 meters long. It's 10 meters deep, or 3 meters deep. 10. It's big. They're really, really big pools. So part per trillion is extremely small, extremely sensitive. And the problem is these compounds have what's called a long half-life. Once they go into your body, they stay in your body for years. And usually when we talk about half-lives, we're talking nuclear medicine. I was in the Navy. We're sort of used to that. This stuff just is a very strange compound. Because the bonds inside of it are so strong, it just doesn't break down. And for some strange reason, the human body doesn't kick these compounds out. Rodents, which is where a lot of the testing is done, get the compounds out much faster. Rabbits, which is where some of the testing was done, get them out much, much faster. But unfortunately, the human body hangs on to them for an extended time period.
And we bioaccumulate, so.
Well, when they don't leave out and you continue to consume, you bioaccumulate. That's sort of the definition of bioaccumulation. And these compounds, it's not just in drinking water. In certain places, it is in the air. It can be in dust. These compounds were used in a ton of materials, pizza boxes, microwave popcorn bags, Gore-Tex. If anybody's got any Gore-Tex on right now, you got it on you. Scotchgard had PFOS, which was really good at keeping stains off. Resolve was PFOA. It's really good at getting stains out. They use these compounds in everything. Food wrappers. If you've ever had a cheeseburger sitting on top of your nice chinos and you ate it while you're driving along and you got done and you picked up the wrapper and there was nothing on your chinos, that paper was coated with PFAS. It's almost guaranteed. So there's very, very broad use of these compounds. There's over 4,000 known in industrial use. Through the testing with EPA, we found there's a number that don't have names, so they're not admitted in the inventories. So these compounds are just very, very broadly used. And so you do bioaccumulate because you do get exposures. There's even testing done of frosted chocolate cake, and it came back quite high. I mean, your doctor will tell you frosted chocolate cake is not good
No more
for
cake
you.
for you. Here. Okay, so we'll go to Mr. Dolan, and then I'll go to the person in the back.
Thank you very much for everyone's time. Greatly
Appreciate it.
appreciate
your
your
questions?
explanations. Yes, I got a million more, but, or will have a million more,
So,
rather.
just so that the people who are looking at these maps, help them understand, there are 2 primary maps in the package here for PFOAs. One is for DW, which is drinking water, and the other one is for SW, is surface water.
Yes.
That's correct.
That's their report.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if one of these residents falls outside the agreed to area, the consent decree, what are their options to get consideration from the plant? I mean, if you can count on these maps, you can count a number of contaminated drinking water sites that are outside the consent decree line. What do they do? What are their options, and what's safe for them to do, and what's legally available for them to do?
So from the state standpoint, we've agreed to this consent decree. They agree inside the blue line, and it's on, oh, it's not on their map. You added it here. Basically, it goes to High Ridge Road.
Correct.
You're to the east of High Ridge Road.
High Range Road?
High Range, sorry. I said I live in Litchfield. Then they don't agree that they're responsible for you. There are areas where the companies, and it's not all Saint-Gobain, we've got other companies. In fact, you've got one in your town called TCI that uses these same compounds in their factory and in a development facility up by the airport. They don't agree to responsibility. There are a couple groups that have gone to class action lawsuits here in the state. One of the things we were very careful in the consent decree is the state has not precluded anybody's individual rights. So if you feel you have been damaged and you need to be made whole, you absolutely can go after them. They have not gotten any relief from the state for that. All we've said is for the requirement of dealing with the groundwater contamination, this is what the state is demanding, and they've met those demands. The testing, obviously, will have to go out to the blue line now with the new standards. That's gonna take a lot of time. One of the concerns, and like I said, I know nobody's ever happy unless they're tested 2 days ago and they want the results in a week. You can't just have anybody go do this. There's special protocols to doing this testing. And so we want to make sure that they keep good professional crews on, they keep good, tight training on them so that we get good results. We did go through a batch early on where we had some false positives, where the laboratory actually had self-contaminated and people were being told they were drinking contaminated water and they weren't. That's not a good thing either. So we want to make sure that they follow a plan where we can make sure they're doing high quality work and the results are high quality. That means we can't just have them hire willy-nilly and throw 1,000 crews out. We've got to make sure that they're doing it at a pace where we can actually make sure good work is getting done and the results are something we have confidence in.
Well, it sounds like that there is a legal process that's playing out, and some people will be remedied perhaps by that, others may not. But from a home ownership standpoint, where you're potentially consuming contaminated drinking water, what recommendations do you have for how folks who find themselves in a situation with their drinking water, how should they behave in terms of consumption, boiling it, whatever? How do they react so that they don't put themselves or their family at continued risk?
Right. So the first thing is don't boil it. It doesn't do anything. You'll actually concentrate it down more because the water will evaporate off and the PFAS won't. So that doesn't do anything in this particular set of compounds. There is information on our website that if you want to put treatment on your house, or if you want to do a point of use where you actually draw your drinking water from, there are filters that will work against these compounds. They're based on a couple of technologies, and there's information on the website for that. If you do want to do testing in advance, there are instructions on how to do it. You can either hire a professional, and we list out the labs that do it, or you can do it yourself. We give instruction on how to do that so you don't self-contaminate. So you can do testing, you can do treatment, and then we have published, if you want to go to bottled water as an interim step, just to have a little bit better confidence, there is a listing of bottled waters that have tested, non-detect.
So consumption of the water is one thing. In cooking, is that, you consider that equivalent to consumption? Can you cook pasta in this type of water, or should you use the bottled water for cooking as well?
Anything that you're going to put in your mouth, we consider ingestion. So even brushing your teeth, because you're intentionally going to take some of the water and intentionally put it inside your body. Other things, showering, it does not come through your skin at any sort of rate compared to ingestion. Breathing in droplets or breathing in the steam, nothing compared to drinking. You drink 2 liters a day, which, depending on how you do the math, it's multiple pounds a day. You don't ingest multiple pounds of water. You don't absorb multiple pounds of water through your skin. The real point is ingestion. So
do the water filters in refrigerators filter this?
They're not really effective. The ones that are in most are granulated activated carbon, called GAC. GAC is very effective, but you have to have a large enough vessel that there's enough contact time. They will knock it down a little bit. Testing's been done in Minnesota. And again, there's a report from Minnesota of their testing on our website. It'll knock it down a little bit, but it won't fully treat. There are under sink systems.
Reverse osmosis?
Reverse osmosis is one of the
solution?
technologies. There's a number of systems, you can go buy that will combine reverse osmosis and GAC to sort of give it a polishing. They're very effective. There's some good results out there. But that's a personal choice to get that put on. The other, as I said, and in the end, some of this is also just stress. I mean, it's stressful wondering if you want to reduce your stress, go look at the website, get some bottled water that's non-detect, and catch your breath. Had a number of people, like I said, in Litchfield and Merrimack and some of the others, that just doing that so that they could catch their breath, figure out what was going on, they said it was helpful to them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. We have an aquifer up on Litchfield Road, one of the main aquifers in town. Are you guys aware of that?
I'm not familiar with that particular one, no.
Well, that's, if I recall correctly, it's one of our larger aquifers in town, up off of Litchfield Road. Let's look into that quickly.
Yeah. There was testing down along that corridor when we first started the investigation. And there is, as you come up right to the boundary between Litchfield and Londonderry, everybody in that area was below 70, the old standard, but some of those homes are above the new standard. And that's where I believe some homes are already on bottled water. I saw one of the gentlemen had a letter. I recognize the letter because I've seen some others.
Yeah, I mean, we bought the land around that aquifer about 15 years ago, the town did. So that's, I'm pretty sure I remember where it is. I'm in the blue area, so I understand. I'm, west of High Range Road. Okay, sir, go ahead.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Name and address.
Well, first off,
Name and address.
I'd like to...
Name and address. Name and address, please.
Okay. Ray Breslin, 3 Gary Drive.
Thank you.
I'd like to congratulate the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and others who have worked very diligently on this problem. And we've had a lot of explanations here, but this PFOA, PFOSs, and so forth are a very serious problem. And we need to, the public needs to realize that testing of water is extremely important. We in the town of Londonderry are currently doing, as part of this, water quality and water quantity study, which is one thing when we're talking about arsenic and so forth and other contaminants. We also have several Superfund sites right here in town, which also may have some of these contaminants in it. Would you? I'm not sure I can ask a question.
You address the question to the council, and then I'll ask them to answer.
Okay. So, are we aware that PFOAs and PFOSs and other contaminants may well be in some of the Superfund sites in the town of Londonderry?
The Tinkham Superfund site, which is off of 102, is currently under testing with DES, and there is that's an ongoing piece. I don't know the answer to your question, but I know it's an ongoing piece.
Yeah.
The Superfund site on Auburn Road, I believe, has been capped and is, I'm not sure what the testing still is on that site.
Okay, well,
Gentlemen know?
I believe it's still under a groundwater management zone permit, and therefore there is testing. We have started in the last year that all groundwater management zone permit holders must test for PFAS. And yes, unfortunately, on a number of the Superfund sites where a remedy was put in place for volatile organic compounds or metals or something else, what we found is the PFAS went with that compound, and they are, in many cases, they are being retained. Whatever the structure for capping and everything, it works for these compounds also, but when you measure inside of some of these places, the levels inside are quite high.
Okay. So, the EPA, the federal EPA, is currently doing studies, testing on the Tinkham site and the Auburn Road site.
Correct.
Okay. So we're talking about St. Gobans. Mm-hmm. We know there's a problem there, okay? But we also have a problem with these other Superfund sites, okay? And as you've explained, it's in our clothing, it's in all kinds of different stuff, okay? Once it's in your body, it's not going away, okay? Probably all of us have it here in our blood, okay? A little bit, probably not going to kill us. But this is about the young people. This is a safety issue. I hear that the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services really has no legal control to tell St. Gobain's or anyone else manufacturing some of this product that they can no longer do that. I wonder about that, okay? Wait a minute. We're talking about public safety, all right? And if we don't have government groups, organizations that can say, whoa, stop making this stuff. They have already gone to the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to ask about what can we put on the stacks coming out of this thing to clean this up. As far as I'm concerned, they should stop making it, okay? Also, I don't see anything in this study that says anything about air quality. This stuff goes up in the air, it goes along with the wind, and it settles on the ground and the water. If you've got a body of water, and it happens to be blowing in that direction, like Lake Massabesic, for instance, where we get most of our water, potentially it can settle in there, all right? A little bit, probably not too bad, okay? It also settles in the Merrimack River, which Pennachuck gets most of their water from.
Okay, we've got 1 minute, Ray.
1 minute, okay. We'll settle it down here. All right, so very important that we're finally doing some studies on water quality and water quantity, okay? But I would strongly suggest that if the government, meaning the federal EPA or the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services or the bodies here are limited on what they can do, we need to look into that. We're talking about public safety here. What's more important than air and water? Okay? I'm not here to lecture anybody, but let's really think seriously about this and see what we can do to control some of this. We need to look at the Superfund sites. We need to know exactly what's coming out of them. They are Superfund sites. They're not gone away. Just because something's been capped, like Auburn Road, it's still leaching out. It's leaching out into wetland. Who's testing that water?
All right, Ray? Thank you for your comments.
Thank you
Appreciate
for the
it.
time.
All right, you're welcome. Do you want to address any of that?
Yeah, a lot. You cover a lot in 5 minutes. I'll see if I can do the same. The first thing you mentioned is it's about children, and it absolutely is. The standards we set used some very new information that was developed by Minnesota, and what it showed is the most troublesome pathway for these compounds is through breastfeeding. And first of all, the very strong advocation, if anybody is in the situation where you're trying to make a decision, breastfeeding has a ton of health benefits to the child and the mother. We strongly recommend continued breastfeeding. However, breastfeeding is also very efficient at transferring these compounds from the mother to the child. And so these standards were set to protect even that most concerning case. So these are very conservative standards, and they are set to protect a nursing child where the mother is drinking contaminated water every drink she drinks. So they are conservative protective standards. So if you're right near them and you are not nursing, or you're not nursing someone, you can take a little bit of comfort. Obviously, it's not full comfort. As far as air emissions, the statement Ray made is correct. We cannot just shut the factory down. We did get a request to basically go and padlock them. That's not how it works. Factories put out chemicals. They do it all the time. Those chemicals are generally not good for you to get inside of your body. What we have is a law that says that once we can show that what they're emitting is still adding to a groundwater problem, they had a time period to get a permit application in. They met that deadline. Once we issue them a permit, they have 12 months to get installation of the system and complete testing to show it's working. We have to go through a public hearing. The public hearing for that air permit is the 5th of November in Merrimack at 6 o'clock. If you would like to make public comment. to sort of help you. If you don't make comment, we can issue the permit faster and get them to treatment faster. So think about the comments you add, because we have to take time to reply. Once that is in place, the technology that they have proposed, it's under a ruling called Best Available Control Technology. They have to show that what they put forward is the best available control technology. That's where the name comes from. And they have done that. They have produced a design on something called a thermal oxidizer. Think of it as a really big afterburner. You heat up the tube that the gases are coming out of really, really hot, and it breaks the key bonds inside of these compounds. And the nice part is it just breaks these compounds in every PFAS, not just PFOA or PFOS, but PF anything. It breaks these bonds down. So it is the best technology. We got to get through the permit hearing, we got to issue the permit, they got to install, and then they have to test to prove it's working. So it is really important that we get through that and get them with that. That will cut off what's going to the air. We have done air testing, and it's way, way down from what it used to be. And part of the challenge with these compounds is what you're measuring in your water built up there over the past 20, 30 years. And so if they're adding almost nothing today, it might not make any effect, but what you're really looking at is what's added up there over 20, 30 years. And so the additional amounts that are coming out today are less concerning than the levels they used to put out. And once we put treatment on, then they really will be down where we will have confidence that nothing further is happening. Mentioned was Massabesic. Manchester Waterworks water has been tested multiple times. It is very, very low to non-detect. So Massabesic apparently was out of the wind patterns. We're very fortunate with that. The Merrimack River has also been tested, and other than there's one discharge coming off of the plant, Merrimack River is also very, very low, well below the standards we're talking about. So some of the water sources that are out there have been tested and they have not been contaminated. Obviously, if your private well has, that's irrelevant to you. And arsenic, you mentioned arsenic. There is arsenic in your water. In some of the homes I looked at, the arsenic is significantly higher than even the current state standard. If you are going to test for PFAS, please test for arsenic. While this stuff is sort of an evolving science as to what exactly it does, we know exactly what arsenic does to you, and it's not good. So please, if you're going to test your water, include tests for arsenic. And if you do get a test that's above the current state standard, or better yet, look at the new state standard of 5 parts per billion, please consider treatment. Everybody seems to think because arsenic is naturally occurring, you can just ignore it. Please don't do that. We know exactly what arsenic does to you, and it's not good. It is a terrible compound to get in your body. Please test for it, and if it's there, please treat for it. Now, Brandon did that.
Go to the council first.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chair. I noticed in your studies you had 2 wells that came up on Mammoth Road. One had tested for 90 and one at 159. Are those being reached out to?
That was on yours, right, on the map? In the packet.
They're just north of Litchfield Road?
It's not this map, though. First one you had up?
On Mammoth?
On Mammoth.
The one from our study?
Yeah.
Yep.
From the study that was done, yeah.
Our study or their study?
It was just the first map you had up, Steve.
Okay, that's
That's there.
That's their study.
To the right of the blue line.
this map.
Yeah. If you want to zoom in just north of Litchfield on Mammoth.
I didn't see anything at 90 in this report.
It's 90 and 159 according to this.
Can you give which site it is?
We'll move it over for you. Keep going up. Right there. Go right around here. These two. Bring it up as much as you can.
Oh, yes, they have been reached out to. It's not St. Cobain.
I figured that it wasn't, considering the location, but I just wanted to make sure. It seemed very high level, so.
They were discovered early on, well over a year ago.
Okay.
How could, so the other follow-up question. So the other question would be, how would it be, just for common knowledge, how would it be where you're surrounded by zeros and fours and twos and threes, and all of a sudden in two areas, 159 and 90, there could be some super Superfund site that used to be there, or what would cause that?
Somebody buried an old car there?
Something, yeah.
Yeah, and besides the two Superfund sites, DES is looking at a number of hazardous waste sites that are kind of scattered throughout the state. There are some in Londonderry. I don't know if that was a tanker rollover. Mark, do you recall?
I believe that tanker rollover was actually further north on Mammoth, right before.
If you'd like to talk
town
about
line.
those specific homes, I'd be glad to do it outside of here, but I think the owners of those homes would prefer to not have it
Of course.
publicly discussed.
Sounds good. I just want to
You
make sure
do,
that.
not far from there was a tanker truck that rolled over.
It was
true.
by
late
North
to left.
School, yeah.
By North.
Fortunately, the fire department now knows to call, and they did a great job in calling us, and the spill crew went out right away, and we haven't really seen anything with that. But to give you an idea, in Litchfield, where we've done a ton of this testing, I've stood at a person's house that was at 24 parts per trillion, and his 4 neighbors were all over 200. I got a bad wing, and I could have thrown a rock and hit all of the houses. With the air deposition, you see some very odd patterns. The other is, again, this is parts per trillion. We've had at least one public building that did a really, really good job of stripping and waxing their floors. Their well was in the janitor's closet. It does not take much at parts per trillion. You know, you put a pint of the wrong material and let it get into your well, and you'll be many, many parts per trillion. These concentrations are just very, very, very low. And so you can self-contaminate, and we certainly, as I said, is one example of a public building that just did a great job of cleaning, stripping, and waxing their floors. They self-contaminated. We've got examples more at the seacoast where an automated car wash, some of the, you know, when you go through and it's touchless and it does all this stuff to magically wash away, they use surfactant materials, and these things have unique surfactant properties. And so some of the compounds that are used in automated car washes have tested very high for some of these compounds.
I guess the follow-up question would be, if you have, in this particular situation, I know we don't want to talk about the 90 and the 159, but in this particular situation, we tested a bunch of different areas or a bunch of different addresses there. But it's not safe to say that just because down the street you had a 4 or a 5 doesn't mean that you're not a 90, I guess. That's the point.
Oh, that's one. It's surrounded by zeros.
That's what I mean.
So something's going on.
Yeah, we do see in Bedford, where we have areas where we've tested a lot of wells in particular neighborhoods, we do see a high degree of variability from one house to the next, going from 0 to above the new standard. I think some of that is partly attributed to complexity in how groundwater flows into somebody's individual well. Some wells get groundwater from very deep fractures, and that water could be clean compared to water that's coming from a shallow fracture. So I think there's a lot of complexity just in the way water gets to an individual's well.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so folks, I'm going to continue to take comment up to 9 o'clock. So if you want to come up and speak to the council, I'm going to cut things off at 9 o'clock. So this gentleman back here raised his hand, then this nice lady over here raised hers, and then it was this gentleman here, and then I'll take you, sir. Just trying to be fair to everybody. Sorry about that.
5 minutes, start the clock. Paul Ambler again, 14 Tokenell Drive. Do appreciate you guys coming out, asking the questions. I'm actually not in the St. Gobain zone, but I am in the Tinkham zone, and I've been contacted several times by Haley and Aldrich, the legal firm that's representing the Tinkham Group. My background is actually in water purification. Worked for Dean Kamen for 4 years, developing water purification for developing nations. I've actually stood there with a bio ball of E. coli and, oh yeah, Ebola. I'm first name basis with Nelson Analytical. That was a fun day with Ebola. So, I bought my house in 2013 while I worked at Decker Research as the lead mechanical engineer for the Slingshot water purifier. I knew a lot about clean water. I knew where aquifers came from. I generally had a pretty good idea on where the water was coming from when I bought my house on Tokenell. I had that water tested up one wall and down the other with the very best that Nelson Analytical could do in 2013. My water was tested by Haley and Aldrich in 2018, and then they called me up again as a surprise. It passed all of the state standards, and then they called me and said, we want to test it again. I said, why? Well, because water tables change. Not when it comes from an underground water aquifer, but they wanted to test it, and I wasn't paying for it, so I said, what the hell? Go ahead, test it. It's going to be clean again, and it was. And then about, 2 months ago, they called me and said, well, the state changed the standard. So now your water doesn't pass. And I'm on bottled water from Monadnock, which I'm really glad to find out Monadnock is at least cleaner than what they're saying my well water is. But my question is, we talk about PFOA, PFAS, and you've decreased the standard, which just took effect 2 months ago, according to Haley and Aldridge, correct?
September 30th.
September 30th. And like I said, they called me and said, hey, by the way, state changed the standard, and now I have yet to receive a report from Haley and Aldridge of that actual test, like, yes, here's your second test, and here's the report, and here's how it doesn't pass, because I'd really like to see that. But my question is, we talk about how scary PFOA and PFAS are in the water supply, and you mentioned Minnesota?
Amongst other states we work with,
Okay.
yes.
I guess my two questions, and I'm addressing them to the council, and the council will effectively throw up the shield and bounce them off to you. How do we know what the health effects are in terms of benefits of those new standards versus the old standards? And what are the demonstrated long-term solutions for providing those new standards of water quality to a municipal area? So I'm on bottled water right now, which I gotta be honest with you, I'm not using. It's just wicked frickin' heavy, and it's sitting in my hallway. Where were those standards arrived at, and what is the tangible health benefit of those standards? And what are the proven long-term municipal implementations for delivering that water quality?
So, as I said, you can go online and get the full technical write-up by Jonathan Ali, who's the toxicologist.
Where can I go to get that?
www.des.nh.gov. And in the top banner, you'll notice a line of blue text. Just click on the blue text.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
And that drops you into the area with all of the stuff for this whole investigation for all the sites in the state. As far as, in your case, I'm assuming you have PFOA. PFOA is
I have absolutely no idea. They called me and said, hey, you're above the standard. I said, with what? I said, whoa.
And since you're next to a Superfund site, it could be others, because also one of them was PFHXS. We did see that in some of the results from some of the near the Superfund sites. So for each one, there's a different health endpoint is the way it's calculated. You go to a study, you find the most sensitive effect that shows up in the test animals, and then you translate that over to a human blood level, and then you translate that over to a drinking water standard that will protect to keep your blood level below where the animal showed the sign. So for instance, one of my know offhand is PFOS. It affects children's immunology. So if they take a vaccine, it doesn't work as well for them.
Neat.
Obviously, that's a bad thing, and so you set a standard very low to make sure that's protected. And so if you go online, you can go find out, get your report, which they should have provided to you, and I don't know why they didn't, but I can't speak to them. Get the report, find out which of the compounds, and you can actually go in Jonathan's either write-up, which is very dense. I mean, Dean would have a hard time on it. It's pretty dense.
That would make me happy, because I want him to have a hard time.
There's also a presentation, though, that Jonathan did that walks through in a little more pedestrian terms, a little easier to understand. And it does break out for each of the compounds what the health effect is that's the most sensitive. The less sensitive are the other things it also protects against. All of these show liver toxicity. It's not good for your liver. You can get fatty liver, or you can have liver enzymes that don't come up right. High cholesterol is very common. You do see some thyroid conditions. There were some indications with a highly, highly contaminated area called the C8 study that did show a couple signs of cancer. In general, all the studies show that cancer is less of a risk than these other things, and so we set the standard to be protective of those other things.
Okay, cool.
Long-term, sorry, you had asked long-term, you have to bounce it off the shield. The gold standard in the state is that you get connected to a public water source, because we consider the engineering long-term on the source and the chances that engineering would have to be changed. If you go to a filtration system and we now find 2 years from now, 3 years from now, that you have some other contaminant, now we have to go change the filtration in every house. So if there's 100 homes, it's 100 systems.
I know of one system you don't have to, but anyhow.
If it's a public water system and we find out that they have the next emerging compound, we just have to fix the plant, then everybody's got treatment instantly. So the state preference is to do it through public water systems. Sometimes that's not reasonable. You just can't physically do it. You're not going to run a 3-mile long water pipe to one house because the water, when it gets there, will be stale. It'll have the stuff you're more familiar with. And so then you go to whole house treatment. Point of entry is the standard. And there, it really depends on what's in your water. The way we normally do it is we have the consultant come in and do a really in-depth test. So they know whether you got manganese, iron, all the other things that are common here. They may have to do a lot of pre-treatment, and then they'll come up with a treatment for the PFAS compound. And then it's a matter of doing the maintenance. If there's a responsible party, they are responsible for doing the maintenance till the compound goes below the AGQS, which is the cleanup standard, ambient groundwater quality standard. If there's not a responsible party, then you would be installing it yourself and you would have to maintain it yourself. Another soapbox thing for us, if you do put treatment on your house, maintain it. If you don't maintain it, worse things will happen than whatever you were filtering for. So that's sort of one of the soapbox things. Don't just test for this compound, test for everything, and then manage your system. Otherwise, your system's going to manage you.
Okay. All right. Where am I at?
You're over, but go ahead.
Damn it. Okay. Nope, I'm good.
I'm trying to give everybody an opportunity.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Yes, Ann?
Ann Champa, 28 Wedgewood Drive. I formerly lived at 10 Brook Road in Litchfield. If you, could I ask Mr. Cotton to show the other screen?
The other
The
screen.
last, the one that had, the other picture that had the tested areas in Litchfield? It was the other view.
Zoom out.
What was pest? Yeah, that's it. Okay, I thought it was another. See that blob to the left of Litchfield Road? That's where I lived before. I lived there for 10 years, starting in 1982. Now, I understand that St. Cobain moved in 1984. Am I correct?
Yes, he's shaking his head yes.
Okay. I can't ask you, so I have to ask the chair.
Yeah, give or take a year, that's about the time
Okay.
frame.
So that
It is
means I...
Kenneth Ave, just to clarify.
Okay.
Bought by St. Cobain.
Okay. So I understand that I lived there for 8 years when Cobain was active in using these products? Okay.
He's shaking his head yes.
Were they using these compounds starting from the time they moved in '84? Does anybody know?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Now, how do I find out if the house I lived at was tested and what levels it tested at? Because last time I checked, it wasn't tested yet or is pending.
You could call me or email me, and I could look up that number for you.
I would love to get that information from you.
The
Thank
other,
you.
if you want, again, if you go to our website, go to the blue banner, there's a tab for maps.
I know, I saw it, and I saw it
You can-
pending or not
You can
tested, depending
check
on
for
that.
any result anywhere in the state. We do, for privacy reasons, if you zoom down too far, where you start getting to be able to see people's houses, it blanks out. You could still see the well and you could still see the results, but you can't necessarily see the exact house.
Right, so I
Trying to
prefer
balance public
talk to
information
this
and privacy.
gentleman, directly. I'll give him my contact information. Now, you were mentioning something about how it affects the body. Where does it accumulate in the body if it does so?
Primarily in the blood. It links to the proteins in the blood and circulates throughout the body.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
You got the contact information, Ian? There you go.
Thanks.
Let's see, it was that gentleman there, yes. And then I'll come to you, sir. Sir, name and address, please, sir.
Sure. Hello, Mr. Chairman. My name is Derek Marcotte. I live at 68 Alexander Road.
Thank you.
I was one of the, I assume, 32 sampled this summer, and
Thank you for doing that.
yes, I figured that the state wanted to do it. Sure, come test the water, and came back with the results. But of course, it's a lot of numbers, so I didn't really read it in depth until I received a letter on Friday, certified mail from St. Gobain. Of course, my wife and I were very concerned. We have a 2-year-old child. We drink the water regularly. And I first do want to make a commendation. I reached out to a number of people today because I've been a little bit stressed about it. And I spoke to Mr. Henderson here, and he responded very quickly. And I spoke to Mr. Martz here, make sure I get that right. And he responded immediately as well. So these gentlemen they will return your call. So I was very happy with that. I guess now that I've been issued this letter from St. Gobain saying we're going to try to remediate in some way, shape, or form. They're offering us bottled water. I guess my concern now is more long-term remediation. We have a filtration system in our house, but the water was sampled prior to that filtration system. Immediately my wife wants me to contact our vendor, Allied Clearwater, to get them to come sample our water after this expensive filtration system. We have radon mitigation, we have water softener, another filter, and apparently I know it takes certain kind of filters to attack this compound. I guess more question would be long-term. If we decided now we want to try to address this situation, is this something that St. Gobain, being under this consent decree, could be responsible for paying for if I'm going to put in a full system, or I guess you may not know that answer, but
I can't speak for what the state's going to do or not going to do. I mean, there has been some public water systems installed in Litchfield, as I recalled. Was there an agreement to do that?
Manchester, Bedford, Merrimack, and Amherst we've had over 700 homes or properties connected to public water systems in the last couple of years.
What I can promise you is that we started attending these meetings over there 3 years ago, and we took our counsel with us, our attorney, and when we've been watching. You can't. So what I can promise you is when we complete this at 9 o'clock, I'm going to ask the council for a consensus to engage our attorney, and that we're going to figure out what our rights are.
okay.
But
Okay.
I can get into that in more detail, when we close public comment.
Sure, okay.
But to let you know, if St. Gobain's reached out to you, you're inside the blue line.
Yeah,
They are responsible for proposing a long-term solution to us. And so long as it meets the regulatory requirements of the state, we would then have them go forward. There have been a few cases where they're moving, they need to sell their house or whatever. St. Gobain did work with a couple of them one-on-one. There is an 800 number for St. Gobain for this. You can call them and individually talk about what your issues or concerns are. And they have with a couple, I mean, not a huge number, they have worked a few things out that we've heard about. When they do, we're not really involved. It's that you're satisfied with what they offer you, and you basically say you don't want into the overall solution.
Right, okay. And I think my test results were at like 40.3 combined, so I think I was number 3 on the list, one of our neighbors, so. And I guess it was more just if I'm gonna remediate, do I wait? Or is this something, obviously there's concern with, health hazards and whatnot, or do we just go for it, keep the receipts and hope that, if there's anything we can go to St. Gobain with, we have records of this. That's more of probably a legal question, so.
And the Attorney General says I absolutely cannot give legal advice. They're very,
Okay.
they repeat that over and over and over.
Okay. I think you
Thank you,
answered
sir.
the questions. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I won't take 5 minutes.
If I could just
Albert
have them-
Sheldon, 17 Chestnut Hill Drive,
Thank you, sir.
beautiful downtown Londonderry. I moved into the community in 1980. I retired out of the Marine Corps in 1883. I was subject to Agent Orange in Vietnam, the 23 months I was there. I went back to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and I was subject to the dirty water that was put on on everybody down there. My family has been exposed to it since 1980, when I moved, 1976 when I moved there. And now I show up here in Londonderry, and now we wind up with the same conditions, and the water situation at Camp Lejeune was based all on blood problems. I've had my colon removed. I've had a 5-way bypass since I've been here. And I'm really concerned about our neighborhood, which is inside the little blue line there. And I would like to see if we can emphasize possibly getting public water into that neighborhood, because I know it's expensive, and I know it's gonna cost the community, but I can't even get the side of my road fixed on my street. But we need to get some action taken to remediate this problem that we have with this water in the community. Is there anything I can get from you folks that might help relieve the problem?
What I can tell you is as a 3-year cancer survivor who lives down the street from you, that listen a little bit later. We're gonna figure out what our rights are.
Okay, well, please do something, because I got a bunch of little kids running around the neighborhood there. They're not mine, but little kids that live in the community that need protection,
I understand.
and the adults that are living with them. Thank you.
Sir. State name and address, sir.
Good evening, Randy Fesh, 9 Darrow Way. Had a couple questions and one comment. The first question I had, as I read through the report, is around the consent decree area that's in blue, and I was wondering how exactly that was determined. What's the statistical significance of that boundary in terms of saying if I'm outside of that boundary, that I'm 95% chances that I'm not affected, or is it 80? Like, where does that lie? And then in conjunction with that, determining the testing, the saturation spread of the water, which I assume was kind of based on water tables, but now I'm hearing well depth might matter as well, which is concerning. How long is that saturation spread, knowing they've been there since 82 or 84? Is the testing now going to be sufficient, or do we need to continually test our property as the saturation spread can continue?
Gentlemen?
So from the standpoint of the consent decree, where the line got set was where the Attorney General said we had a chance in court to win if they fought it, and where they said we had no hope, we agreed to the line. So if you're outside of it, the belief is that there are other sources that are as likely or more likely to be the source of contamination for your house than St. Gobain. If there are other compounds, and there are others out there, and we find that they have spread further because maybe they're lighter, they have a different distribution, those are not covered by the blue line. There is no limit on those. But the original negotiations were on PFOA and PFOS. We had air modeling where we felt we could show how far it went. And again, in consultation between the scientists and the Attorney General, we agreed to a line where we felt we couldn't win any cases on the other side of the line.
Do we have an idea around what the statistical significance of that is?
I don't know how to do statistical significance on a legal probability.
As I didn't know if the legal probability was based on a statistical number, or if they just...
We don't have that quality and kind of data.
Okay. I guess the other thing I wanted to address in terms of whether it's water tables or well depth, in looking at this report, we're talking about 32 homes only, and I know like District 2, I think it said only 3 homes were covered, which seems very small in number to be able to get any determination of exactly how widespread this problem really is in Londonderry from a statistical significance perspective, accounting the water tables, the well depth. So it's great that we have this report here. I'm not even sure how much emphasis you guys can really put on this without getting to a further study to get more in depth to determine what Londonderry needs to do. And I would encourage you to get additional testing and get further results rather than relying on this study of 32 homes.
I think that's why I was asking about, when you have these numbers that are kind of scattered all around and there's no real significant cause for one to be up and one to be down, we can't really just say, okay, well, my house is like three blocks down there, and all these numbers were low, so I'm okay. Can't do that, right? I think the chairman talked about the aquifers and maybe looking at those being tested. I think that's kind of one way that we should really look at, because like you said, if it's depth, okay, and the water's down further, at least we know from the aquifers that it's coming from, maybe that'll help us a little bit, you know?
Yeah,
More information, the better.
So we've had this a real short period of time.
Yeah.
This isn't the end.
Okay. Yeah.
By no
So-
means.
Well, I know in past some of the studies that I've seen the town rely on, even like on the Stonehenge project for stuff, I'm like, they sampled one day of the year and we're trying to make determinations on that. So I'd encourage you on this one, let's go a little deeper and not rely on the first study.
Yes.
If I could, you've got 32 samples. That's 32 more than most towns. Most towns don't go do this at all. The fact that your town did, I was sort of shocked when I got called up for support. Most towns don't do this, and you should be happy that your town management does go find the resources to at least do a background sampling, because most towns don't do it at all. It's great to work with a town that actually does invest in finding out what's going on in the background environment.
And I will say, just one more thing, that we sent a lot of letters out, and the feedback is, what, 40% maybe, 30%?
Less than 30%.
Less than 30%. It's great to have everybody here, and everybody could spread it around. I mean, the offer was there, and the letters were going out, but we weren't getting any.
Yeah, I'd make sure those letters, I know I didn't get one of the letters, but I know someone that did, and it didn't seem to really clarify the urgency around the PFOA testing. It just said, we're testing your water. So I think maybe if you express some of the urgency of what you're testing for, a little more demonstratively in those letters, you might get a better response rate.
Right, and the same study in 2001 had the same numbers too. It was still in that 30 to 40% range, so
Yeah.
anyways.
Okay, sir. Name and address, sir.
Thank you. Mike Pettingill, Apollo Road Extension. Really direct questions. Did the mailings for testing samples go to every household in Londonderry or targeted households?
Gentlemen?
Yeah, no, they were targeted.
Okay. Second question, does increased load on the water supply have an effect on concentration or increasing future concentration? Or is it like, for example, adding 200 houses to a particular area, could that affect the concentration or the health hazard of this?
I think at this time, we don't have enough data to answer your question.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, you gotta come on up.
I'll be quick.
No worries. Our policy generally is if you showed up here, I mean, I'm gonna set a time at 9. You showed up here, I'm not gonna tell you you can't speak. That's
Okay.
just not the way we roll.
Okay. I've lived here a lot of years. This is my first meeting. My name's Lorraine Chan. I live on Laurel Hill, which is one of the areas that's contaminated. One of my concerns is you call St. Gobain to see if you can get bottled water. Nobody calls you back. I've called 3 times. I've also registered the house for state testing, and I hear that's not going to happen anytime soon.
So he didn't say it's not gonna happen anytime soon. He says it's a really long process. We're gonna get further into that with them offline.
Okay, but one of my questions is, we're spending, our taxes are high in the town. Not that I'm complaining, I pay them. But now I can't even drink the water. We have to pay for bottled water. I mean, and who knows if the air quality hasn't been tested. This stuff has seeped into the ground, and who knows even if the air is safe.
I can't answer all those questions, but this gentleman over here is raising his hand.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I can't tell you when we'll do testing on any individual home, because like I said, we've just gotten their draft plan. We're sitting down with them this week.
Okay.
We've got to go through and come up with a plan overall. And I apologize, 'cause obviously you want to know that it was getting tested yesterday. Everybody does.
Well, no,
And-
I don't
and
want
it's
to
fair.
know that. I want to know what, okay, in the interim, we're paying for bottled water. We know we're in the area. So, I mean, why should we, after paying high taxes, have to pay for bottled water? And these PFOAs absorb differently with different people. Younger children absorb them differently. Adults, one adult in a household could be affected, another one not. So health
They absorb into
problems,
human
too.
beings pretty evenly.
Uh-huh.
Children tend to discharge them faster. So they actually do clear out a little bit faster than adults. But it's actually not huge variability in humans. We're very good at absorbing these, and we're terrible at rejecting them. Unfortunately, we're consistently in that pattern. As far as the air quality, as I said, we have done air testing. There's air testing done back in around 2008, and then there was testing done in 16 and 18, and the amount that's coming out in the air is much, much lower. PFOA, they used to put out close to a ton a year, and they're now down to significantly less than 1 pound. So, and you're miles away. So I wouldn't worry about the air quality. Drinking water is a different issue because this stuff builds up in the groundwater and it just sits there and it doesn't go anywhere. Right. So obviously that's a reasonable concern and one that I can understand you being concerned about. Bottled water, if you're on that, that should help, and the body does reject these things over time.
No, I understand the bottled water help, but we're spending a fortune on bottled water. You're saying that if we cook with it, these contaminants add up in the water, so you can't cook with it. So now, if you have pets, you can't let them drink the water. I mean, I have to 6 bottles of water for my pet a day. I mean, it's really becoming expensive. And I mean, I don't know how long this has been going on. You people said the last levels were safe. then you lowered them. But I had a dog that was very healthy that died of autoimmune disease. And there's a couple people in the neighborhood that also have autoimmune disease. And that's one of the effects of the PFOAs. So, I mean, you know, I'm concerned at how long this has been going on and that nobody knew. You know, I've been through this before at work. The government says nothing here and people are dying. So those are my concerns.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. So when I meet with St. Cobain later this week, how long has it been since they have not returned your first phone call to the hotline?
I talked to you last week, I believe. Okay, and you were very good. You were very, very explained it at a, you know, level that, you know, people can understand. But after I got off the phone with you, I think it was a week ago, I called them. You said it would take 2 days, 1 or 2. Have not heard from them. Called them again today. I've called them 3 times, and I believe there's other people in my neighborhood that are also having this problem. It's like the ghost effect from St. Cobain. I mean, I don't know. You tell me. I mean, I know it's that time of year, but it's like you just get the recording. I mean, and I've tried to, a lot of people in the town, which is disturbing, do not know that there is even a problem with the water. I mean, I did try to put that there was a meeting tonight on the website so people will know, but I think that also the residents need to be informed a little better of what actually going on, because, I mean, they're in my neighborhood, on Mayflower, right behind me, there's two people that are really sick. And I mean, my house is right in front of them, a butt's right in front of them. So, I mean, and nobody has informed us. I mean, I heard word of mouth, you know, like the game telephone. You know, well, but as far as getting any information from anybody else, it's all, I've been finding out about this, and like I said, I went through a similar problem with the government at work, telling us there was nothing there. It was built on a chemical site, the building. There was something there. People died. So, I mean, that's what concerns me, any kind of toxin levels, because I've seen it.
Well, as we mentioned, we are meeting with St. Cobain later this week. We can certainly talk to them about being more responsive to phone calls. We have had a couple runs where they have not been as responsive. We get on them and they tend to do better for a while at least.
I've given them my cell phone number.
Yeah,
Because
we'll bring it up with them.
Even so, if I'm out, that I'll answer my phone. So, because, you know, I don't sit home all day.
Right.
So I've given them that so that, but there's been no calls on it.
Okay.
Save your receipts for the water you bought.
Water, I have an English master. She drinks 9 bottles a day. I hate to tell you, so I'm going through water. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. So, but thank you, and I hope, something can get resolved.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just make one comment on that. Is it, just for the communication piece, can we post something on our website that can have folks be aware of this and also have it where we can have this map so people can actually look up their addresses and see if there is an issue? Maybe we can post it on the website? We instruct the town manager?
Yeah, put a link on the Facebook page and.
Just to try to the person's point here, that we need to, really communicate this and not spread widespread panic, but at the same time, those areas that could be more affected, let them know what that 1-800 number is, San Cobain, et cetera. I think communication is important here.
Great. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to offer a data point from a cost standpoint. People have been talking about what it costs. And I think this probably fits within the short-term solution. It's definitely not a long-term solution. But I have a second home where the water quality is not reliable. So I installed, you heard the term reverse osmosis. I installed one of those systems. It installs under your kitchen sink. You have to pay a plumber to install it unless you're pretty handy with that stuff. It's not all that expensive. The filters are about $300 a year, and you get about 8 to 10 gallons a day of drinking water out of the particular system that I installed. So that gives you a feel for the cost. Recurring cost is about $300 a year for me, plus whatever the one-time cost for the plumber to install it, which was probably, if I remember right, $200 or $300 to install it. It fits up under your kitchen sink, and there are 3 cartridges that hang down, and that's the reverse osmosis system. It would extend this meeting way too long. If you don't understand what reverse osmosis is, I would recommend you Google it and read up on it a little bit. But it's a technology that I think could provide you some safety for a relatively small cost.
Okay, so folks, I'm at about 10 after 9. Last speaker.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman. I think I can do this in less than a minute. I wanted to thank the town council for giving the voters the opportunity to fund this study. I want to thank the voters for supporting it. I'd like to thank DES for being down here with a robust presence and even sending the assistant commissioners. I appreciate that. And I hope that we will follow through on this. One area that we haven't much talked about is arsenic, and it's probably medically a greater threat to our residents even than the fluorinated substances. An eyeball check says that there's a correlation between older septic systems and high arsenic in the maps that we generated the last time around. Haven't had a chance to look at these. Is there any evidence in the scientific literature that would indicate that such a correlation could exist?
No, around here it tends to be from the rock itself.
Yep.
You get certain conditions that'll liberate it out of the rock more easily, and so there's certain areas of the state where we get really high arsenic levels. Looking through the report here, I mean, there are a couple of these homes. You probably ought to be worried about arsenic far more than anything that starts with a P.
Right. And then finally, it's sort of along the same line, I just want to salute DES for the scientific rigor that they brought to this problem and setting their new limits. And I'd like to salute them for having the moral courage to set them at a very low level that is going to be fully protective of everybody from babies to oldsters like myself. I think you're doing a great job for our state, and I appreciate, again, your being down here tonight.
Apparently you don't work for 3M or the Plymouth Water District.
So,
Sir, thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for participating this evening. If you just want to hold on a second, I'm going to ask the council for a consensus to direct the town staff and town management, as well as the council, to engage with our legal counsel. Our legal counsel is, used to work for the state. He's a former state attorney, worked for the State Attorney General's office. He's a criminal and civil litigator by trade, and I'd like to ask the council that we engage him to find out what the rights of the citizens are in this town and to what extent we can work within the law to protect everybody.
You got it.
You got it. Got it. Thank you. Yes.
So folks, so you'll be, we'll be engaged in seeing what we can do, and we'll keep following this. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. Appreciate all the answers and everything. You may get some other people that want to speak to you outside of this meeting. So I think you've left your contact information.
I can leave a copy with you.
That'd be great, and we'll put that information out there. And thank you. Appreciate it very much. And folks, you don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting. We're probably going to finish up pretty quickly. And but if you'd like to stay, we always enjoy the company. Thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the minutes of the October 7th meeting.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Second, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative. Minutes for October 7th are approved. I have an appointment here on the books for Don Turcott to the Traffic Safety Committee. I accept the motion to appoint Don.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative. Don, please see the clerk to be sworn in.
Oh, yes.
Do I have liaison
I drive by that
reports?
plant every morning. I look over it, my blood pressure shoots through the roof. I want the air treatment on that plant more than anybody.
Thanks for taking the time tonight. I really,
Just hold off for a second.
This is Scott. I'm a state rep. And I want to thank you for coming down.
Okay.
But I'd like to have your business card done.
Yeah, have a good trip. I thought you said I'm a business guy. I used to be.
Okay, thanks.
I know.
I don't even think he knows he was already taken care of. Hi, folks. If you want to take this outside, that would be great. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Turcott? Yes, we just appointed you and told you to see the clerk while everybody was talking.
Congratulations. Thank
Congratulations.
you for
I
stepping
hope that was an easy enough process for you.
up. Thank you.
Yes, Bob?
Can I ask a dumb question?
There are no dumb questions.
Any reason why, when we're having these nominees to the committees, it can't be done up in the front, so they don't have to wait around the whole night to get nominated, to get approved?
Generally, I'm a lot better at it, and I generally do that. And I'll be perfectly candid, I missed it.
Okay, you forgive them.
But in general, I try to do that so they don't have to wait here the whole night.
Yeah, when you just said, "Oh, that's Don," I'm like, "Oh, he was out." Sorry.
So, well, listen, his appointment process was easy.
I know that.
Well, because you recommended, we just went right to the approval.
So you learned something. That was good.
So, all right, liaison reports. Do I have anything new from the council? Liaison reports?
No.
All righty. Lisa?
I just wanted to remind you, Mr. Chair, could we set the meeting schedule for November and December?
So we have our budget workshop on the 2nd, so we moved the council meeting to the 7th. If I'm looking at the 18th, my question is that I'm not going to be in town on the 18th. Are any of the rest of you not going to be in town, or you don't know?
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
I'll be here.
Not sure.
We'll get a quorum.
Yeah. Well, we're doing budget, so I want to make sure everybody's here. So that's my reason for asking. Are all you guys here the week of Thanksgiving?
Yes.
I'll be
Everybody
here on the 25th.
The 25th?
I'll be here.
Yeah.
Good. All right, so let's move it to the 25th so that we're all here because we're doing budgets. That way we can make
So
sure we're all.
18 goes to 25?
18 goes to 25, so we're at 7 and 25. I just want to make sure we're all available to do the budgets.
Okay.
So we'll do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Kirby, do we need December as well?
Can we have December too, because we have some issues for the planning department, they need to
set some hearings, I believe, and notify butters and.
So if we do the 25th, can we do the 9th?
Okay.
You guys want to do the 16th or the 23rd?
Ooh.
Probably the 16th.
Yeah.
So let's do the 16th, and, all right, so,
The 23rd is right before Christmas, so.
right.
People might be taking that week off.
So let's do the 9th and the 16th, and if we have to, because of dates and where we are in the budget, we may have to have a meeting sometime between the 23rd and the 6th to wrap some things up. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Is there, let's see, anything further this evening, gentlemen? Anything further, Kirby? Do you have anything further? You have an item, don't you?
Yeah, don't you have an, no, you introduced the item.
Oh, well, today is Mr. Combs' birthday.
Hey.
Counselor Combs, happy birthday.
Thank you.
And we have something for you.
Oh?
Don't burn my hand.
Yes, a frosted cake.
Here, you know what?
Bird finger.
Burns
Our channels aren't lighting, so there you go.
That's
funny, but
Wait, we gotta sing happy
Yeah,
birthday.
we
too.
can't-
I mean, come on.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Ted. Happy birthday to you. She's almost got it.
You're gonna spend
One
your
more
birthday
time,
here,
one
you
more
gotta at
time.
least have a cake.
One more time.
One more.
You got this. You got this. You can do it.
I have the fire chief in here for this one.
Got it. Nice. Nice. Burning all.
Make a wish. Yeah, I burned my finger.
All right.
And with that, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
I will motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes affirmative, we are adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.